Ever send a text you really hoped wouldn't get seen by the wrong person?
Yeah.
Like maybe something embarrassing?
Well, yeah.
Or maybe, something that could get you in trouble if it fell into the wrong hands?
Mm-hmm.
Well, imagine that anxiety multiplied by 1,000,000?
Oh, wow.
Because today we're diving into a hacking situation.
Uh-oh.
That's so serious that the FBI is practically telling people to just stop texting altogether.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's striking.
Right.
This isn't some distant cyber threat.
Exactly.
This is happening right now.
Yes.
And it has major implications for how we communicate.
Absolutely. And we've got a whole stack of articles here from sources like Forbes,
Oh, wow.
Newsweek, even Boing Boing,
Okay.
all about a Chinese cyber attack that's been codenamed Salt Typhoon.
Oh, okay.
And apparently it hit major U.S. telecom companies
Oh.
like AT&T,
Wow.
Verizon, and Lumen Technologies.
I see.
So our mission today is to unpack exactly what happened, how vulnerable our texts actually are,
Right.
and what you should do about it.
I'm ready.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay, so from what I'm seeing in these articles, this wasn't just some random hack.
Right.
These Chinese hackers.
Yeah.
They specifically targeted these companies with the goal of spying
Oh, wow.
on American consumers.
Okay.
And they weren't after just anyone.
Right.
They were particularly interested in government officials
Ah.
and high-profile political figures.
So anyone with information that the Chinese government might consider valuable.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, that's unsettling.
It is.
So it sounds like their main focus was collecting metadata.
That's what the article suggests.
Okay.
That means they could see who contacted whom and when,
Yeah.
which is still a big privacy breach.
Of course.
But the good news is they didn't seem to get the actual content
Okay.
of most calls and texts.
Okay, that's somewhat reassuring. But some of the articles mentioned that some content was compromised.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where things get really concerning.
Okay.
The articles state that a limited number of calls and texts belonging to people involved in government or political activities
Yeah.
were compromised.
Okay.
So the hackers actually got their hands on the content
Wow.
of those conversations.
And to make matters worse, this wasn't just a one-time thing.
No, it's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
The FBI has been investigating these attacks since late spring.
Wow.
Early summer of 2024.
Okay.
And they've actually called it an ongoing attack
Oh, wow.
that is likely larger in scale
Okay.
than previously understood.
So it's like a sustained campaign.
Yeah.
Which makes the FBI's response even more noteworthy.
Right.
They're practically saying stop texting,
Yeah.
at least in certain situations.
It seems drastic, doesn't it?
It does.
Huh.
What's the logic behind such a strong warning?
It all comes down to encryption and how vulnerable our current systems are.
Yeah.
The FBI, along with CELESA, so the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency,
Right.
they're specifically advising Americans to stop sending texts
Right.
between iPhones and Androids.
Okay. So cross-platform texting.
Yeah.
Why?
Because those messages rely on RCS or rich communication services for encryption.
Okay.
And here's the kicker.
Okay.
In the U.S., all RCS messages are actually decrypted by Google.
So even though it's supposed to be encrypted, there's this major vulnerability. Does that mean that iPhone to iPhone or Android to Android texts are safe?
That's the good news.
Okay.
Messages within the Apple and Android ecosystems are fully encrypted.
Okay.
So iPhone to iPhone texts use iMessage,
Mm-hmm.
and Android to Android texts use Google Messages.
Okay.
And both of those have end-to-end encryption.
Okay, hold on. Before we go any further,
Yeah.
can you break down what end-to-end encryption means?
Sure.
For those of us who aren't tech experts.
Uh,
It sounds important, but kind of complicated.
It's actually simpler than it sounds.
Okay.
Imagine you're sending a letter,
Okay.
but you want to make sure only the recipient can read it.
Uh-huh.
So you put it in a locked box
Yeah.
and send it off.
Okay.
That box is the encryption.
Okay.
It scrambles the message.
Uh-huh.
So only someone with the key can unlock it
Right.
and read it.
Yeah.
End-to-end encryption is like that locked box,
Okay.
but only the sender and the recipient have the key.
Okay.
Not even the company that made the box, or in this case, the messaging app, can open it.
So even if hackers got into WhatsApp servers,
Right.
they couldn't see my messages.
Exactly.
That's reassuring.
It is end-to-end encryption. Protects your privacy, even if the network itself is compromised.
Okay.
Which is why it's so crucial in light of these attacks.
So the FBI is recommending that we use apps like WhatsApp and Signal
Right.
for all our communication because those have end-to-end encryption, regardless of whether the person we're texting has an iPhone or Android.
Exactly.
But isn't there some irony in the FBI pushing encryption
Oh, yeah?
when they've historically opposed it?
There is, and it speaks volumes about how serious this situation is.
So what were their concerns with end-to-end encryption before?
Well, they argued that it hindered investigations.
Okay.
Like, their concern was that if they needed to access someone's messages for an investigation,
Right.
they couldn't if those messages were end-to-end encrypted.
Okay.
It essentially created like a black box
I see.
they couldn't see into.
But now the FBI is urging everyone to use it for protection.
Right.
It seems like the Salt Typhoon situation has forced them to kind of rethink
Yeah.
their stance on encryption, hasn't it?
It really has. You know, they're acknowledging that in a world where even our telecom networks are vulnerable.
Right.
Strong encryption is like the best defense we have.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights a fundamental shift in their thinking
Yeah.
about how to balance security and privacy
Right.
in the digital age.
Okay. So for anyone listening who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed,
Yeah.
let's break this down.
Okay.
If we're texting someone with a different kind of phone, like iPhone to Android or vice versa,
Right.
we should switch to WhatsApp, Signal, or another app
Right.
with end-to-end encryption.
Exactly.
That's a good first step.
It is.
But there's another layer to this that I think we need to consider.
Okay.
Even with encrypted apps, metadata is still being generated.
Right.
So that means things like
Yeah.
who you contacted when and for how long
Right.
is still out there.
It is.
So even if they can't see what I'm saying, they can still see who I'm talking to and when.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel very private.
No, it's a valid concern
Yeah.
that metadata can be surprisingly revealing.
Okay.
Let's think of it this way.
Okay.
Imagine you send a letter in that lockbox we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Even if no one can open the box
Uh-huh.
to read the letter itself,
Right.
they can still see the return address,
Yeah.
the recipient's address,
Okay.
the postmark,
Uh-huh.
the size and weight of the package,
Okay.
and even what postal service you used.
I see.
All of that is metadata.
I see.
Right.
Okay. I'm starting to understand how valuable that information could be to
Right.
someone who wants to snoop.
Exactly. In the context of texting, that metadata could include things like phone numbers,
Mm-hmm.
timestamps,
Okay.
call durations, even if they can't hear the conversation,
Right.
IP addresses,
Mm-hmm.
even location data.
Okay, this is getting a little unsettling.
Yeah.
What could someone actually do with all of that information?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they're reading my messages.
Don't underestimate the power of metadata.
Okay.
Hackers and intelligence agencies,
Yeah.
they can analyze it
Uh-huh.
to track your movements,
Okay.
your contacts,
Yeah.
map out your social network,
Uh-huh.
and even infer sensitive information about your life.
Oh, wow.
For example, imagine someone looking at your call logs
Okay.
and noticing you frequently contact
Yeah.
a specific medical specialist.
Okay.
They might deduce that you're dealing with a health issue,
Yeah.
even without knowing the specifics.
That's kind of scary.
It is.
And we share this information without even thinking about it.
We do. We've become so used to the convenience
Yeah.
of these apps
Yeah.
that we often forget about the digital trail
Right.
we're leaving behind.
So the key is to be aware of
Okay.
the potential risks
Yeah,
and make informed choices.
exactly. There are steps you can take
Okay.
to minimize your metadata footprint,
Mm-hmm.
but they often involve trade-offs.
Okay.
You can use a VPN to mask your IP address.
Uh-huh.
Be more mindful of the permissions you grant apps,
Right.
or disable location services altogether.
It sounds like a balancing act
It is.
between convenience and privacy.
You hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution. The best approach is to be aware of the information you're sharing
Uh-huh.
and make choices that align with your personal risk tolerance.
This is a lot to process.
It is.
Before we move on, I want to rewicket something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
You said this whole hacking situation
Yeah.
could change how we text in the future. What
Right.
did you mean?
Well, there's been a lot of buzz around RCS,
Okay.
replacing SMS as the standard for texting.
Right.
It promises to be faster, more reliable,
Okay.
and have more features.
Uh-huh.
But this Salt Typhoon incident
Yeah.
exposed a major security flaw in RCS.
So you're saying this could actually derail the adoption of RCS?
It's certainly a possibility.
Right.
If people lose trust in RCS
Yeah.
because of these security concerns,
Uh-huh.
It could significantly hinder its widespread adoption.
Okay.
Ironically, this might actually accelerate the shift towards fully encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp and Signal,
Right.
which is exactly what the FBI is recommending.
It's almost as if this whole ordeal could end up pushing us towards a more secure future for texting.
Yeah.
Even if it's kind of by accident.
It's a strange twist.
It is.
But this situation also raises a critical question
Okay.
about the balance
Yeah.
between security and privacy.
Right.
On the one hand, encrypted messaging apps provide individuals with a high level of privacy.
Okay.
But on the other hand,
Yeah.
they present challenges for law enforcement agencies who rely on access to data
Right.
for investigations.
Right. The FBI has been arguing for years that they need some kind of backdoor access to encrypted messages.
Right.
But privacy advocates push back, saying that any kind of backdoor would inherently weaken the entire system and make it vulnerable to exploitation.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
And Salt Typhoon just adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
Where do we draw the line
Exactly.
between individual privacy and national security?
This is the question.
It's a debate that will likely continue for years to come.
This whole conversation has been eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see texting in a completely different light.
That's the power of a deep dive.
Right.
We're taking a closer look at something we often take for granted and uncovering the complexities beneath the surface.
So what can our listeners do to stay informed and protect themselves in this ever-evolving landscape of cyber threats and privacy concerns? Well, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface. But I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on.
Definitely.
What stands out to you as the most crucial takeaways?
Well, the first step is awareness.
Okay.
You know, we need to be mindful of the information we share, both intentionally and unintentionally.
Right.
That means thinking critically about the apps we use, the permissions we grant, and the data we generate.
It's not just about what we're saying in our texts.
But also who we're talking to. Even where we are. When we send those messages, that metadata can paint a pretty detailed picture of our lives.
It can.
And the second takeaway is that we have more control over our digital privacy than we might realize.
Right.
We can choose to use encrypted messaging apps.
Exactly.
VPNs, privacy-focused settings to limit our exposure.
Yeah. It's empowering to know that we have options.
Yeah.
Even if it means sacrificing a bit of convenience.
But I want to shift gears for a moment
Okay.
and talk about the broader implications of this attack.
Okay.
We've been focusing on the individual impact.
Right.
But what about the political fallout?
Yeah.
The articles mentioned that these hackers specifically targeted people in government and politics. What are the risks of China having access to this kind of data, even if it's just metadata?
It's a serious concern. Yeah.
Knowing who government officials are communicating with and when can be incredibly valuable from an intelligence standpoint, even without knowing the content of conversations.
Yeah.
They can infer relationships, track patterns, and potentially identify vulnerabilities.
So they could use this information to blackmail people,
Potential.
influence decisions, or even disrupt political processes.
It's possible.
It sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it?
It does.
This is a prime example of how cyber espionage is blurring the lines between traditional warfare and information warfare.
Right.
The battlefield is no longer just physical. It's also digital.
And what about the impact on U.S.-China relations?
Oh, that's a good question.
These articles mention that U.S. government agencies held a classified briefing for all senators on Salt Typhoon. And there's growing concern about the scope of this hacking.
Right.
This could escalate tensions.
It could.
Between the two countries, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This kind of activity is rarely tolerated.
Okay.
We could see retaliatory actions from the U.S., either in the cyber realm or through diplomatic channels.
Okay.
It wouldn't be surprising to see sanctions imposed or diplomatic relations strained.
It sounds like the Salt Typhoon situation is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, I think so.
When it comes to the growing importance of cybersecurity on the global stage, as we become increasingly reliant on technology, we also become more vulnerable to these kinds of attacks.
It's a new kind of arms race.
It is.
But instead of bombs and missiles,
yeah,
it's data and code.
It's information.
Countries are investing heavily in their cyber capabilities, both offensive and defensive.
Sobering thought, but it highlights the need for greater awareness and preparedness.
Yeah, we can't afford to be complacent.
Right.
In a world where even our text messages can be weaponized.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the technical details of encryption to the broader political implications of cyber espionage.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation.
It has.
We learned about the Typhoon attack, the vulnerability of RCS, the importance of end-to-end encryption, and the risks associated with metadata.
Yes. And most importantly, we've given our listeners some practical steps they can take.
I hope so.
To enhance their digital security and privacy.
It's been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
And I hope it's empowered our listeners to be more informed and proactive.
Absolutely.
In this increasingly complex digital landscape.
I agree. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
Okay.
We've talked about the immediate impact of Typhoon. What about the long-term consequences?
Yeah.
Will this event be a catalyst for greater government regulation of cybersecurity?
That's a good question.
Or will we see a continued shift toward individual responsibility and reliance on private companies to secure our data?
It's hard to say.
What do you think?
Yeah, what do you think?
Let us know in the comments.
Yes.
And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay secure.